Hey y'all, how's it going? Hope everyone's doing super awesome today. Welcome to Zahatka. My name is Valentina, and today I'll be showing you a tutorial for a book sleeve with an adorable little ruffle around the edge. Gives it just that little special touch that if you don't have it, that touch isn't there, obviously. But if you want to see how to draft a pattern and actually sew a book sleeve like this, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you'd like, and let's get to sewing!
So to make your pattern, what you're going to do is first find out the measurements of the book that you want. Regularly, a hardcover book is about 9 inches by 6 inches, and I'm going based off of that. So I'm making the tallness of my little book sleeve 9 inches and the width of it 12 inches. So whatever book you have, I would add at least an inch around the whole border. So top, bottom, and each side. And then you just trace it out on your tracing paper wherever you want, just those measurements, so you have it for future reference. So you're not always measuring it out. It's much easier that way, and it doesn't have to be any kind of drafting paper. Then for your ruffle, you're going to do at least 1.5 of your circumference of your bag, not of the 3 sides of your bag. So you have 9 plus 9 plus 12, so 18 plus 12 is 28, 30. And so what you're going to do is times that by at least 1.5 or more. I usually do at least 1.75 just so I have extra ruffle. It is better to have extra than not enough. And then for your straps, you do 2-inch. Oh, and that ruffle is 2.5 inches wide. And your straps are going to be 2 inches wide, and I did it 12 inches in length, but I would recommend doing it at least 15 if you want a longer straps. So I think next time I would do 15 or 16 inches. But I draw, after doing all that drafting and cutting, I drew on my quilted pattern. You draw on whatever you want. My go-to is the diamond stitch, 1.5 inches. And I draw that on with a heat erasable pen, and then I just sew over that. So whenever you're doing a quilted pattern, your fabric will shrink about 1/2 inch on the sides and on the top and bottom. So first it measures 12 inches by 9, and then after the quilted pattern is done, it's 11.5 by 8.5. So just keep that in mind for future reference. Make sure you account for that. And then cut off all the excess of the polyfill batting, and then iron down those heat erasable pen marks. And I'm doing it at an angle, so I'm just marking down the lines, not doing the whole thing, so it still has that puff effect. Now for the ruffle, I have 2 separate pieces that I have to sew together to make sure it's long enough, and so I just do that first, and then I fold it in half. And at the beginning and at the end, I fold it inside itself just like that, so I don't have a raw edge. It keeps it together. And then I make sure that my settings are correct. The tension and the length of the stitch, you want it at a 4 for the length of the stitch, and at about a 5 or a 6 for the tension, so your thread is movable to create that ruffle effect once we're done sewing it. And when sewing for the ruffle, don't do a back stitch in the beginning or the end. And then basically you're just pulling on the thread and bunching it together to however of your liking. I do it not so tightly whenever I'm doing it on these little pouches because I like to lay it out the way I want it anyways. So I do that, and then we're gonna jump to the straps. I have my 2-inch by 12-inch with the diagonal cut on the straps because I wanted it to be pointy at the end for the strap. And I just sew it all around, pretty side to pretty side. which mine are the same, but if you are doing it and your straps are different sides, one is pretty, one is not, sew it pretty side to pretty side and then turn it right side out. Then I iron them flat to make sure that they're all nice and neat, and it's time to attach them to our book sleeve. And so you put it on the pretty side of your book sleeve, and then you put your liner on top of that. So it's the outer layer, the strap, and then your liner. And make sure the liner, if it has two different sides, is pretty side to pretty side. And you just sew that straight across, and it turns out like this. And then we're gonna iron it down on top right here. So it's gonna be easier for us to create a top stitch. And you wanna do a top stitch so it holds down the liner. So all I do is iron it down on the front and then iron it down on the back, and just so the outer layer is peeking up a little bit. I do those steps to both sides of the book sleeve, so now they're still separated, the book sleeve sides. And whenever you're doing the top stitch, make sure that your strap is laying up and is not in the way, and it's gonna end up looking like that. Now it's time to attach the ruffle, and here's what I said. I kind of arrange it myself after to make sure it looks nice and evenly bunched in places. So I do put a lot of clips on it in this step, and that does take a little minute to just make sure that I like how it's laying, but it's well worth it at the end. After I have my ruffle attached to my liking of the placement of it, I just sew a straight stitch all around the ruffle pieces. So all around those three edges, I just sew a top stitch, straight stitch to make sure that the ruffle is stitched down. After the ruffle is sewed down, it's time to attach both sides of our book sleeves together. And so what you do is just line it up, make sure the seams line up at the top, and just clip it all around however many clips you need. I tend to overuse my clips, so that's just up to you. And you'll do that same for the liner. Just make sure that your strap is not in the way. And you're gonna sew all around except leaving that little 2-inch to 1-inch gap so you can turn your project right side out. And you're sewing this pretty side to pretty side. And before you turn your project right side out, you just want to clip the corners at a diagonal angle and then cut off any extra fabric you may have that may make it look bulky. And then through that little hole, just turn your project right side out. Once you have poked out all the corners and everything, you sew that little gap up and your project will be done. Now, before this video ends, I did want to say thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and letting me be a part of your day. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, and hitting that little bell button, all that good stuff that helps me out. I would really appreciate it. And I really hope that this tutorial was helpful for you. I know book sleeves are very popular right now, and that little ruffle just gives it the little pizzazz that I think it needs. See y'all again next time. Bye!